That's what's nice about being the chair, you can always lie about the start time.
For the wildfires. These two documents are on table items for the wildfire.
Sure. One of them just ask her. I'll just ask her.
She's great, I should know, right?
Well, thank you.
Hey, how are you, Ian?
Oh, sorry, I have a bad cold. So I'm not moving as fast as I thought I would be this morning, including getting up the hill.
It's hard to run and breathe when you have a cold.
So these 2 pages that you've just got, just tuck them underneath your agenda for a minute. And,
There's something else.
Oh, okay. No, just. So we'll do it on this computer. You want to
okay, we're going to take a couple of seconds while people get themselves organized over here. And I've asked Steph to print some pages. Some of them are the right ones, and we'll see whether we even need them, so don't worry about it. There. This is the, as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, the second meeting of the Emergency Preparedness Executive Committee, correct? Okay, and so looking through our agendas and papers and things this morning, I was realizing that we haven't really met since June the 6th. We had a workshop, which was a week after our last meeting, which is May the 30th, and that's the one that's in our agenda here. And so during the meeting, I would appreciate everybody's help in helping us stay on topic as we move from the Emergency Management Program Plan Update Committee, whatever that was, to this new committee, right? Which we're mostly is about providing direction to Jen and sort of being an in-between council and us and the emergency program, right? So that, rather than doing a whole lot of work, I just wanted us to try and focus on that. Okay, so looking at the agenda, do I have anything to add? I have a couple of, oh no, they're just sideways things, yep.
I would like to bring up the either reopening Bishop's Hill or have a proper gate at the top that can be open for fire protection.
Okay, I think
New business.
we should, yeah, we should talk about here because it's about whether Jen would pick this up as a staff person, but I don't know, Kathy, you've got some input?
Yeah, I would say that's a purely operational decision, right? And if you feel there should be a better gate up there, then we should.
Well, yeah, there's no gate now, there's a giant berm
Yeah.
with lock blocks, so there's some hassle.
Okay, so let's talk to Bob and we put a gate in.
Well, it might be something, hang on, yeah. It might be something to talk about because it might relate to evacuation plans and things like that.
That was my response to Ian when he said he wanted to bring it up. I said, oh, from an evacuation standpoint, I have input as well, but
Sure,
it
no,
doesn't have to
that's
be.
good, yeah.
I don't know whether it needs to come up at this meeting or would it be better at the emergency management program. Let's put it on. What the heck? And then we can show that we've thought about it, okay?
6.4 Bishop's Hill.
Thank you.
And one more,
Yep.
I think. Just the topic of warming and cooling centers for the public.
Oh, right, okay. A new business, 6.5.
Warming and cooling centers.
Yeah.
Before it gets too cold.
Okay. Okay. All right. And anybody else? Okay, can I have approval of the agenda? Thank
As
you,
amended.
Gary, as amended and seconded by Maureen. Thank you. And all in favor, I'll just take that. Okay. And the minutes are here. I've looked at them back in May. They look good to me, but if anybody has any comments or would like to move to adopt the minutes.
So,
Sit down. Thank you, Maureen, Gary. Any other fast. And that was May the 30th, and then we had a workshop, just to remind everybody. We had a workshop June the 6th, and it was related to whether we wanted to, it was kind of an overview. Jen gave us a big overview on and brought us up to date, basically. I think that's mostly what it was. We recommended to the, that Jen do the HRVA, the hazard risk assessment, before updating the whole emergency plan, and that's basically what you're doing with the committee, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so just to, it's not a formal motion because it was just a workshop. Okay, but basically just so we're caught up after the eventful summer, or not eventful here, but lots of emergencies around the world. Okay. Looking at our agenda proper then, the first thing, and bear with me if I'm missing things, I have a certain amount of brain fog from this folder. Okay, wildfires 2017 updates. Jen and I were both up in the interior wildfire zones. And Jen, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience? And but just briefly, mostly I'm interested in what could we learn from your experience that, or you learn that we could apply to Bowen Island situation?
Yeah, it really highlighted for me the importance of training people in advance. So I think I've said this numerous times, but there were a lot of convergent volunteers. So just for background, I was participating in the emergency social services response in Kamloops. So they obviously opened a reception center to receive thousands of evacuees. And put a call out across the province for assistance. I responded and was sent up for 10 days, and they were very long days, probably 14 hours a day in the reception center, basically just supervising the registration and referrals process because they had so many convergent volunteers. A lot of them were new to the process. They had maybe an hour of training and they were thrown in. So it really highlighted, like I said, the importance of making sure that we have enough people to respond in advance because training them on the fly has a lot of issues with it. So it was a very unique response. There were a large number of task members, which isn't normal, I would say. A large number of evacuees, and the road closures made it very complicated to determine who was on evacuation alert, who was on order, whether or not they could get home. It really struck me the importance of being aware of the situation. So it really helped to be there all the time because everything was changing so quickly. So you really need tools for people so that they know what's going on if they weren't there for the morning briefing or they weren't, properly trained. So just situational awareness, having information displays, having cheat sheets for people.
For volunteers.
For volunteers, yeah. So it gave me a lot of ideas in terms of things that make their job easier, especially when they haven't received the training that they should. And it's a really easy solution to that problem. I highlighted the importance of training in advance, and just really, I was amazed at the volunteers. There were volunteers taking evacuees home, volunteers coming before or after they'd worked, shifts. There were doctors and nurses that worked 12-hour shifts and then came and volunteered. And then there were the evacuees that volunteered, so people who had been forced from their homes were some of the best volunteers that I worked with. So it was really staggering to see just the outpouring of support. I would definitely live in Kamloops after that experience.
Yeah.
Seems like a great city.
Okay, thank you. I was just looking for something brief. I think that's terrific that you've had that experience, Boy, as an apprenticeship kind of, or thrown in on the deep end kind of experience, what could be better in your new role. Or maybe there are things that could be better, but I think that's great that you took them up on that. May I ask, is that something that we as a municipality paid for? Because I think that would be fine.
Of course you can ask. The municipality did pay me, but is being reimbursed by the province for my wages and expenses, so no.
Super. Okay, even better. All right, and then, so my little update is my sister was in near one of the very first fires up outside of Williams Lake. She was haying on the hill, she was driving the tractor up and down, haying, picking up the bales. when she saw the lightning strike on the hillside beside her, big steep hillside. My sister just keeps going. She's going, okay, I'm gonna finish the field. And there was no smoke or anything, right? But it was later on, like an hour later, after 2 more strikes, that a neighbor came and, they're used to this up here. Anyway, a neighbor came and panicked, like, we're packing. And then the fear spread through the neighborhood. The fear spread through Facebook. I got a Facebook message saying, help, you know, here's the situation. I have 4 horses and 1 horse trailer, and the lightning is, you know, it's burning. Anyway, this went on until, well, I went up mid-August. The fire had been burning, and it kept burning. She was reaching out through Facebook, interestingly, to all kinds of people. Most of the neighbors up there were coordinating through Facebook. She had self-evacuated to Williams Lake. The evacuation order was coming down on Williams Lake. They went home. It was safer at home by that time. Part of their surroundings had burned. And they had a fire break, and they had irrigation for the hayfield and all that stuff. At this point, I was helping her from down here, sending her links to maps and updated information, because I could do that remotely from online sources that I could find. She's not as map and document oriented, and there are some fabulous tools where you could see the fire perimeter and you could see the evacuation orders and when things had changed, and Jen will know all this too. But as a person in an evacuation area, which moved from, she evacuated when it wasn't any status, and then it became an alert status and she went home, and then it became an evacuation order where everybody's supposed to leave, and she stayed, because they all have a certain amount of cards to play, and if they're always looking around and assessing the situation, and those people up there have lots of smarts and equipment and experience, and anyway, it all worked out. They only raised, but when I went up, there was another fire. There were several fires that had been moving in, and the most recent one, we went through a roadblock into an evacuation order area, because it had been creeping up the road while I was up there, and this is just because she didn't want to be alone on the property. Make decisions, you need two heads. And we went down and talked to the RCMP, who had a roadblock, and said, we had an arrangement. We thought the roadblock would be lifted by now. We have to go harvest our neighbor's garlic, or, you know, a long-standing kind of thing. And we were on bicycles. That's how they let us through. They knew we weren't going to loot anything. And anyway, it's interesting also just to watch the local people in evacuation orders get around the rules, but not in a risky way. They were all watching out for each other and helping each other and that kind of thing. Anyway, and supporting the firefighters too. I mean, lots of them had firefighting experience. So this is just a bit of the feeling from the field, which was they were all on the alert system. Not everybody was getting their notifications, partly because of cell phone coverage and things like that, I think. And but they were, social media was a huge player, and I don't know if you found that too, Jen. Yeah. And
For good and bad.
yeah. And anyway, and I also think what I noticed was that most of the people in her valley stayed, and I think the current, just looking at it at a provincial level, because we're going to UBCM next week, what would have been better in their situation, I think, is the kind of situation they've got in Australia, where people can choose to stay or go. If they choose to stay, they have to get the training. It's like a gun license, you know, you have to take the firearms training if you want to have a gun. And that way, there would be less of the threat. There wasn't just a fire threat, there was also a threat that people would be forced to leave their vulnerable animals, that they would have their kids taken away from them, and that their places would be looted in some situations, but not in their area, because everybody stayed. So all of those kinds of things were things that I just think we could be aware of. Also just the scale of the thing, right? This summer, unprecedented scale of wildfires, speaks to climate change and forest practices, and we'll get to logging later in the agenda. So I think I went a little over, but it was a pretty wake-up call for me too, also just in terms of the amount of materials that were available online. This started. Anything to add? Yeah.
What cities or sisters?
Halfway between Horsefall and likely on Reed Valley Road. Very rural. Very rural.
I'm gonna say lightweight.
Okay, that's closest. All right, and that's a little update for Bowen. What it raised in me was it reminded me of the sense of panic I've sensed a few times when people get on social media and they say, we don't have an evacuation plan. This was back in the Fort McMurray fires especially, and how we need to take that into consideration with our thinking and having whatever information we've got, having it out there, and if we don't have it, say why. Just be really clear so that people don't assume things that are way worse than they are. Anyway, that's my little report. Okay, and Jen, can you give us, on to 4.2, can you give us a little emergency social services update? Where have you got to? I hear we've got NERPs again and all that.
Happily, yeah, the NERPs are reforming. I know I've been saying that for a while, but they are actually reforming this month or next month, so that's in the process of getting organized. We have two volunteers who have offered to sort of lead the program. As for ESS, there are approximately 30 volunteers with various levels of training. Some are, I volunteered with 10 years ago who haven't trained since then, but I still consider them volunteers. We'll definitely call them in if we have to. There's lots of training happening, as you might have noticed. We're hosting some on island. We're sending volunteers off island for specific training. We have four of the people in leadership positions. So Carolyn, Bruce, and the two NERP gals doing a 2-day volunteer leadership course next month. There are jobs now and job descriptions for team members, and some have actually
Volunteer jobs.
Some have actually been assigned. Yeah. We've purchased some supplies, vests, reception center staffing charts. We have a volunteer working on reception center layouts, so digital measured layouts of the reception centers. And the next most important step that we are addressing hopefully tonight at the ESS meeting is resource acquisition, so setting up supplier agreements with people that could supply food, lodging, and clothing in the event of an emergency.
Great, thank you. And so tonight you've got a meeting?
Tonight there's an ESS meeting. Paulo has kindly volunteered the RCMP station, so we're having it down there just for a change of scenery.
Great. And you've got a newsletter now?
Carolyn's publishing a newsletter approximately every 2 months, yeah.
Right. Great. Just so people know the resources are out there, and if people ask questions, sometimes I've found the newsletter and send it to them, and it gives them a feeling of, oh gosh, look at all this stuff that's happening, I want to get involved.
And I'm posting them to the website as well, so ESS has its own page on the municipal website,
Oh, good.
and the newsletters are all available there as well as the additional information.
Good. Just so
who are
people
the two NERP volunteers?
Oh, Denise Richard and Robin Fenton. Yeah, I think one of their first orders of business is getting in touch with Sue Ritchie to sort of, chat, get her support, maybe even bring her to the first meeting so that there's more buy-in from the previous volunteers.
Okay.
So they're sort of gathering some of the history and connecting with the head NERPs, if you will, in each neighborhood to sort of determine how to best proceed.
Okay.
Great. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
And a couple of questions. With the website, when you go to the website, there's the meet and greet, but it's not very high profile. And I'm just thinking about a person in an emergency going to the website, and we have 12 items related to transportation here, and a link to the emergency pages, I think, on.
I think that in an emergency, Sophie would put the information that the public needed to have on the front page of the website. My assumption is that it would not be buried on the emergency program page, or that it would be front and center.
Can I suggest this come to a communication meeting with you, Jen?
I think that might be might be useful. If that's what Sophie would do in an emergency, that's great. But in the interim, I think a higher profile on the everyday website would be
Oh,
of
interesting.
value.
The other issue, obviously, as you know, is that the new website is coming, so
Yeah.
a lot of changes that I would like to make haven't,
Yeah.
I'm holding off.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a conversation for that time, so we can make, I just wouldn't want to put a lot of effort into this one if it's getting.
I think even if we just put a link
To
from
the
our
page.
homepage to the page.
Oh,
We
okay.
can put it either under current topics or, as Maureen says, we have a lot of transportation-related items that can probably be condensed a bit. And,
So now on the current page,
yeah,
or on the
I
current
think it'd be
site?
an easy fix to do.
Sure.
And it also would help with increasing registrations for the emergency.
Sure, yeah, I was thinking this referendum could be replaced with the emergency notification.
Something
system.
like that might be
Yeah.
better. From the transportation point of view, all those things were put on there early on. That could be something I could take to the transportation working group and say, what are we gonna do with this all? Leave them all on the homepage? Because that was back in the days of the small ferry and all that. So, could you put an action item for me to take the transportation issues on the homepage to Boomtown? Because I don't know if they need to be there anymore. Done a lot of work. That's those things, right? Yeah. All kinds of, I don't know if this needs to be there either, actually.
Yeah, I was looking at that the other day, thinking that
Oh.
could probably come down. Yeah.
Yeah, and, yeah, so maybe the quick thing would just be to put the emergency stuff up there.
Yeah, and we've got the new icon for emergency as well.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Oh, we do already?
You-
Here's the emergency committee, tell us about it.
It was discussed yesterday at the communications at Bowen's. I think
Yeah.
you've seen it, so it's just,
It's
The word-
coming later on the agenda.
Oh,
Bowen.
sorry, okay,
There we go.
great. Okay, thank you. All right, and 4.3 here, this was just about the management, the Emergency Program Management Committee.
Sorry, I was just noticing under the news and notices, the
Oh, okay,
meet and
yeah.
greet course is September the
Thank
18th.
you.
Good catch.
that's the date of posting, not the date of the event.
Oh, that's
Well, if you're looking on that website. then-
Hopefully they click on it.
And
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
September 29th.
Maybe we can put September 29th in the title of the post
Yeah,
to make it
yeah.
more clear. Thanks, Rita.
Okay, all right, and thank you. That's a good catch. 4.3, this is the Emergency Program Management Committee. How has that been going? You've had a couple of meetings?
Yeah, well, it's been going well. We've had 3 meetings since this committee last met. So the management committee met in June, July, and September. So the first meeting was basically introductions, the same as this committee, got an overview of the program, an update on past and current projects, and a very brief discussion about updating the HRVA. So that was in June. The July meeting, we discussed the emergency notification system, and we conducted an HRVA workshop, which focused particularly on updating the vulnerabilities section. We canceled the August meeting. I canceled it due to wildfires. I'd been away, but also lots of vacations. So September, we just had that meeting. We discussed again the emergency notification system, including the communications plan. Looked at the updated HRVA sections and discussed conducting an EOC exercise. So the HRVA, to give you some an update on that, I've basically completed to a large.
This is the hazard and risk.
Hazard risk and vulnerability assessment.
Okay.
It's like the core document for the emergency program, and it's what your other plans are supposed to be built upon. So to a large degree, I've completed section 3, which is vulnerabilities, section 4, which is response capabilities, and half of section 5, which is emergency support and preparedness. I've received formal input from Search and Rescue, the RCMP, BC Ambulance, in addition to the work done as the committee. So the next step involves verifying the quantification index, which was that big chart at the end, updating priority hazards and recommendations. So my target date for completion is the end of this year.
I want to clap.
Great.
Okay, thank you. So that committee's working, and you've got the people that you thought were going to show up or showing up and all that kind of thing?
I think so, yeah, for the
Good.
most part. I had a question sort of for this committee in terms of, one of the management committee responsibilities is developing the annual strategic plan. And I don't know how I should go about that. So I'm not sure, maybe that's a conversation for you and I in advance, but I know enough about strategic planning to know that I'm not capable of
I think that was probably slipped through me when I drafted the bylaw. I think that means more of a work plan than strategic.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And I think that's something we can.
That I can
through
do.
this-
Yeah.
And I think that's something we can have through this
Yeah.
committee.
And I believe my understanding, I don't have the whole bylaw in front of me, was that we would sort of develop it, but it would have to be approved by this committee.
Yeah.
So obviously there'd be an opportunity for
Yeah.
input. Okay, that's less scary.
Yeah, for me too.
So yeah, certainly some of the responsibilities of the management committee haven't really been addressed in full, but we'll get there.
Okay. So an annual work plan, if we're gonna look at that at the next meeting, I think that's fine, because you're still in the kind of catch up and
Yeah.
doing the more higher priority stuff that we've set you all kinds of things to do already this year. So,
And
okay,
you're doing a darn good job.
Thank you, Aiden. Keep him busy.
it's exciting, yes, okay. And, all right,
Sue Ellen, sorry, can I just use that opportunity? One of the things we've done with Jen is when we hired her, she was 3 days a week. I had made the decision to have Jen work full-time to the end of the year
yeah,
because there's so much catch-up we're
Yeah.
doing. And we'll revisit that, I think, with this committee, probably towards the end of this year to see what we need to do for
Yeah.
next year.
that's good. Yeah, I did know that you were on full-time, except obviously you were gone part of the summer. How could
Full-time.
you? Yeah. Yeah, okay. And on to 5.1, this is the emergency notification system. Congratulations, you got that up in time for
What
both
about
fest
that?
and all that.
Thank
What
you.
about that recommendation there?
Oh,
So I think that was, it's,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Does that have to be dealt with or?
Yeah.
Oh, this is from the last meeting, right? Go ahead.
Oh, is it?
It's just housekeeping because
Yeah.
you guys, the group made that decision in a workshop where you can't pass resolutions. So just my little clerky side, if you could
Yeah,
just,
We
could
need
just adopt this
to, we need to
resolution.
actually pass that. That's
Yeah.
right, we got this all organized and, but it was in the June the 6th workshop. So would you like to move that, Gary?
Sure, I'll move the recommendation as written.
Okay. Thank you. Kathy seconded that. All in favor? Great. Thank you for bearing with me there. Passed, right?
Now, just for clarification here, Jen, you were saying that you would prepare the work plan and bring it to us. You were saying we should do the work plan. Which way is this I'm gonna go?
She's gonna do the work plan with Kathy and
Okay,
bring
bring
it.
it back to us.
I just
Okay.
meant,
No, with the
Management
the
committee.
With the management committee, yeah.
you're gonna do the work plan with the management committee.
Yeah.
And then it's approved by this committee.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Bring it here for approval.
Oh, just for approval, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So-
Okay.
Just a little
But it is
clarification.
part of these, those are questions I have too, so that's great.
Mhm.
Okay, good. As we were getting into our new ways of working together on these things, yeah. Okay. All right, and 5.1 emergency notification system. Okay. Thank you, Gary.
Oh, I should have checked the enrollment today. Sorry, I meant to give you the latest numbers. But as of September 15th, there were 491 people enrolled, which, by my calculations, was approximately 16% of our population over 14 years of age.
That's great.
So that was then. I wish that I had today's figures for you, but to give you some context, I think that's actually quite good. From other small communities that I was speaking with, the enrollment rate, the highest I heard was 20%. So the fact that we're at 16% without any formal communications and so early in the game, I think is quite good comparatively.
Yeah, a quick question, is that families or is that individuals?
People are meant to register individually.
Individually,
So
okay.
I presume that it's individuals. Obviously, a few have probably slipped through the cracks where they've registered more than one person's contact information, but ideally people are registering for themselves and of course register for your spouse or children if you'd like.
It's
Yeah, but you
interesting.
might be in different places.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay.
mean, like for instance, just set Doug's up for him rather than trying to have him do it for himself. And so I've heard of lots of other people doing the same thing. Yeah, no kidding.
Bonnie?
I just wanted to ask when the formal communication's coming up, just because I was at the Vital conversations, and there was kind of a lot of sort of chit chat, and oh, did you hear? Oh, I haven't heard anything. What's this? And
Yeah.
so yeah, just so it's out there, but it's not.
So that's actually my
information's
next
not full.
bullet point. The communications plan, from what I understand, was approved yesterday at the communications team meeting. So I believe that we will roll that out ASAP. We released this to the public a lot sooner than we had expected to. We actually aren't fully trained in how to use the system at this point, but we wanted to take advantage of BoFest. Once we realized that they could sign up, we decided to just go ahead. So we actually had a kind of funny discussion among the implementation team about, oh, maybe we should tell people that they might not hear from us right away because we're not sure how to use it yet. And then we realized that they're not going to hear from us anyway, for the most part. So we didn't really have to make that information public. But we're still working on the implementation. We're still learning how to use it. We're about halfway through that process. So if we had to send a message tomorrow, it would be messy. We would need assistance from the head office.
Is there a consideration of kind of a dry run, which would serve two purposes: A, to see how well the system's working, and B, it would get it out there?
Great point. That is actually part of the use
Plan.
policy that's included in this agenda. So the communications plan was approved, so I'm not really sure of the timeline, but we're going to go ahead and start, the mail drop and really getting it out to the community.
Is this the policy that's marked draft in this agenda?
Correct.
Okay, I have a couple of questions too.
Sure. So sorry, I'll get to that.
Yeah.
At the meeting yesterday, we didn't go through the policy in detail.
Okay.
So I think there was the expectation that this
Okay.
group would do
Okay.
more of that.
Good.
So we've created lists in the system for the EOC team and for mayor and council. Basically, that allows us to easily message those particular individuals. We're going to create one for the ESS team next. Like I said, the training's ongoing, and yes, that's next is the policy. So I wanted to sort of create a policy around the use of the system. So page 11 of 27 in your agenda is my first shot at the policy. So I wanted to sort of define who could use it, when, what you can say, why you might use it, and so here you have this 4-page policy. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look at it. So I'm hoping for input, any suggestions for edits, and then ultimately, I believe, Kathy, you said this was going to go to council for approval eventually, so I'm assuming this committee recommends that council adopt it once we're satisfied with it?
So I had a couple of questions, and so I'm on page 12 of 27, and this is a little table where it says type of notices that would go out, and at the bottom there, disruptions to critical infrastructure.
So
I wondered which ones,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's like the water's out just in this little part of Eagle Cliff.
this was heavily debated among the implementation team, so we don't actually have an answer. This was the area that they wanted me to highlight to this committee so that we could address it, because I'm leaning towards use it as seldom as possible to, encourage people to enroll so that you don't have people dropping out when you message them about things that they don't care about, frankly. So the disruptions to critical infrastructure part, the key thing about that is that it's unexpected, unplanned, I can't think of any more words
Risk.
for unexpected.
I think if there's risk associated with it, and that could be things
Exactly.
like, I do agree with ferry cancellations, because you may
Because
have a
it's
child
our
coming, and if the ferry's canceled and you don't know about it.
So I was
But I don't know, I would
I was-
open this for discussion.
Exactly. I was thinking about Whistler. If Whistler's Highway 99 were closed, they would want their population to know that. That's your access to critical services, including hospitals. So I think people would want to know. One ferry cancellation, maybe not worth it. 4, 5, 6 ferries,
Yeah.
maybe that is. Because that is, our source of
Lifeline. Yeah.
Also, you had an experience with this in the winter, and there were rumors flying, right? And it was so confusing to people.
And I put in this policy, if this is something that can be addressed through social media, don't use this tool. So at the end of the criteria for use on page 3 or 13 or 27, I put alternatives. Are there other means of communicating?
Oh, okay.
Are other means inadequate to ensure proper delivery of timely information? So, I mean, I guess it comes down to no matter what the policy says, there's always going to be room for interpretation. So, what do we think? And then interruption of utilities, you know, a couple hour power outage, maybe we don't let people know. But if we expect it to be long-standing and it's winter, that's critical. Same with water. If people don't have water, they can't sanitize. So
I think my concern there was more to do with location. So are you going to be able to target just those 5 houses that are going to have the
yeah,
water?
you sure can. And I also put that under factors to consider. So reach of emergency. The system has the ability to send messages using GIS data. I just realized I should define GIS.
Yeah.
And this geographically tailored approach should be used whenever possible. So that was exactly what I was trying to say there. If we don't need to send a message to the whole island, we shouldn't. It should only be to
I think you should
people
use
affected.
those words exactly. If you don't need to send a message to the whole island, don't. I think that would be
That's
helpful.
confusing, yeah.
Because you don't want people to drop out.
The other aspect of this is that only 4 of us know how to use the system at this point, and we all seem to have a fairly common understanding of acceptable use. So this is more
Those
input for us in terms of does everyone else agree, and also in future years down the road, here was the intention.
And the 4 people are you and Sophie.
Myself and Sophie, Aaron Hannon, so Deputy Fire Chief, and Tyler Ruckles.
Right, good. Okay.
Could I suggest just changing disruptions to major disruptions?
Yes.
I mean, that